You already know how this story ends. Nokia, the company that once sold more phones than anyone on Earth, got fat and lazy, missed the iPhone, and died. That is the version everyone repeats. It is also wrong, or at least, it is the small half of a much bigger story. Because Nokia built a phone so tough it became a joke, a brick you could drop off a building and still use to call for help. And yet the company that made it shattered in about 6 years. Here's the part almost nobody tells you. At its peak, this was not just a company. It was very nearly an entire country's economy. So what actually killed Nokia, and what did it cost the nation that bet everything on it? To understand it, you have to start in 1865. Let's start in 1865 in a small town in the forests of Finland, where a man named Frederick Idestam opened a paper mill. That is the real Nokia. Not phones, pulp, ground from Finnish wood. Over the next 100 years, that paper company merged with a rubber works and a cable maker, and slowly grew into a sprawling industrial conglomerate, which is just one company that owns lots of unrelated businesses. And Nokia owned a strange pile of them. It made rubber boots. It made car tires, it made toilet paper, electricity cables, gas masks, even television sets. For most of its long life, Nokia was not a technology company at all. It was, more or less, whatever Finland happened to need. Now jump to the early 1990s. Finland is in freefall. The Soviet Union, right next door and one of its biggest trading partners, has just collapsed, dragging a huge chunk of Finnish trade down with it. The country falls into the worst depression in its modern history. Over about 3 years, the Finnish economy shrinks by more than a tenth. Unemployment climbs toward 1 in 5, and the banks have to be rescued. And in the middle of that wreckage, Nokia makes a bet that sounds almost insane. It sells off the boots, the tires, the cables, nearly everything, to pour itself into one risky new idea: the mobile phone. A young new chief executive named Jorma Ollila points the entire company at a technology most people still saw as a toy for the wealthy. So why did Nokia, of all companies, win the 1990s so completely? Partly luck, and partly two smart calls. First, Nokia bet early on a new digital standard called GSM, the system that let a phone work across borders and that most of the world ended up adopting. While rivals hesitated, Nokia was already building phones for it at enormous scale. Second, it grasped something its competitors missed, that ordinary people, not just business executives, wanted mobile phones, and that those people wanted them simple. Nokia's phones were clean, friendly, and almost impossible to use wrong. Add that famous 4-note ringtone and the little game called Snake. And the mobile phone stopped being a gadget for the rich and became a thing nearly everyone owned. Nokia did not just sell phones, it made the mobile phone normal. And the scale Nokia reached is genuinely hard to picture today. By the early 2000s, it was the most dominant phone maker the world had ever seen, selling around 40% of every mobile phone on the planet, more than its next several competitors put together. In 2008, at the very top, the company brought in over 50 billion euros in a single year. Sit with that for a second. One firm, headquartered in a quiet Nordic country of barely 5 million people, was supplying a huge slice of all the phones on Earth. This was not a big fish in a small pond. For a while, this was the whole ocean. But the raw sales were only half the story. And here is the half the highlight reels skip. Nokia did not just lead Finland's economy. For a while, it practically was Finland's economy. Around the year 2000, this single company made up roughly 4% of the entire country's output. It accounted for about a fifth of everything Finland sold to the rest of the world, and it was something like 70% of the value of the whole Helsinki stock market. Economists have a name for this: a one-company risk. An entire nation's exports, its tax receipts, even its pension savings, all quietly leaning on whether one firm in one industry kept on winning. Put it bluntly, when Nokia's profits sneezed, the Finnish government's budget caught a cold. For years, none of that mattered, because Nokia simply kept winning, which is exactly what made the fall, when it finally came, so dangerous. And one humble little phone came to stand for the whole empire. By 2000, Nokia's value on the stock market had climbed to nearly $250 billion, making it one of the most valuable companies in the world. Yet the device everyone remembers was almost comically basic, the Nokia 3310. No camera, barely any internet. What it had was a battery that lasted for days and a body that simply would not break. People still swap jokes about it surviving drops, car crashes, and the end of the world. It sold in the hundreds of millions. And that is the strange, quiet irony sitting right at the heart of this story. Nokia built a phone famous for being indestructible while sitting on top of a company that was about to prove anything but. Then, in 2007, the ground moved. Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and held up the iPhone, a phone that was really a small computer, with a single sheet of glass and no keyboard at all. The next year, Google launched Android, a free operating system any manufacturer could put on its phones. And here is where every version of this story says exactly the same thing. That Nokia, fat and happy, simply did not see it coming, and got left in the dust. It is a tidy explanation. It is also not really true, because Nokia did see it coming. It saw it coming years early. So the real question is not why Nokia missed the future. It is why a company that could clearly see the future failed so completely to build it. Because long before the iPhone, Nokia's own labs were busy inventing the future. As early as the late 1990s, Nokia engineers had built working touchscreen phones, and even sketched out a tablet you could shop on. In 2005, 2 whole years before Apple's big reveal, Nokia actually sold a touchscreen internet tablet called the 770. So the hardware was not the problem. The talent was not the problem. Nokia was pouring billions of euros into research every single year, more than almost any company in Europe. And in its best years, more than some small countries spent on everything. So, if it had the engineers, the money, and even the early prototypes, what on earth went wrong? The answer is the exact thing. The angry comments under every Nokia video keep pointing at. It was never really about the screen. It was about what lived behind it. What lived behind it was software and a thing the tech world calls a platform. A modern smartphone is not really sold on its hardware. It is sold on its apps, the whole ecosystem of little programs that other people build for it. Apple and Google understood this early. They did not just sell phones, they built marketplaces and invited the entire world to come and fill them. The more apps a phone had, the more buyers it pulled in, and the more buyers it had, the more app makers showed up to build for it. A snowball that only grew. Nokia clung to its old operating system called Symbian, software made for simpler phones, and genuinely painful for outsiders to write apps for. And there was a deeper rot. Researchers who later studied Nokia described a frightened internal culture where middle managers, afraid of delivering bad news, told their bosses what they wanted to hear. The engineers could see the danger coming. Their warnings just kept dying on the way up the ladder. By 2010, Nokia was bleeding, and it brought in a new chief executive, Stephen Elop from Microsoft. Early in 2011, he sent staff a now famous memo. He compared Nokia to a man standing on a burning oil platform who has to jump into the freezing sea just to survive. And then he made the single most argued over decision in the company's history. Instead of adopting Android, the free system busy conquering the world, Nokia bet its entire future on Microsoft's Windows Phone. This is the choice the comments never forgive. Why not just use Android? Nokia's real fear was that on Android it would become just one more identical manufacturer, racing Samsung to the bottom on price. Windows, it hoped, would let it stand apart. It was a genuine strategic bet. It was also, as it turned out, a catastrophe. What followed was one of the fastest falls in business history. Windows Phone never caught on. Without a thriving app store, customers stayed away, which meant app makers stayed away, which meant even fewer customers. The death spiral fed itself. Just look at the raw numbers. In 2007, Nokia made up close to half of all the smartphones sold on the planet. By 2013, only 6 years later, it was under 3%. The most dominant phone company the world had ever seen had, for all practical purposes, lost the entire market it once ruled. The brick that survived everything was bolted to a company that survived almost nothing. In September 2013, it was over. Nokia agreed to sell its phone business, the beating heart of the company, to Microsoft for about €5.5 billion. For a brand that had once been worth $250 billion, that was a fire sale price. And the story has one last, brutal twist. Microsoft's bet went just as badly. Less than 2 years after buying Nokia's phones, Microsoft gave up too. In 2015, it wrote down about $7.5 billion, slightly more than it had paid for the whole business, and cut nearly 8,000 jobs. Nokia's phones had now destroyed the value of 2 of the largest companies on Earth, one right after the other. But step back from the phones for a moment, and remember who else was riding on all of this. An entire country. When Nokia fell, Finland felt it as a kind of national wound. The company that had helped pull the nation out of one depression now helped drag it into years of stagnation. Tens of thousands of jobs vanished. A huge slice of the country's exports and research spending simply evaporated. Now, honesty matters here, and the real truth is more tangled than a single villain. Finland was hit by other blows at the very same time. Its old paper industry was shrinking, and the wider European economy was weak. Nokia was not the only cause of the slump that followed. But losing your one champion, the company that was 4% of everything, is a wound no small country shrugs off quickly. So, did Nokia actually die? This is the question people argue about most, and the honest answer is no, not really. The phone business died. The company did not. Today, Nokia is quietly one of the biggest makers of the network equipment that the entire mobile world runs on, the towers and gear humming behind your 5G signal. In 2016, it bought a giant rival, Alcatel-Lucent, and doubled down on exactly that future. The famous brand does still appear on new phones, but those are built by a separate Finnish company that simply licenses the name, and Finland itself adapted. Nokia spilled thousands of skilled engineers back into the country, and a good many of them went off to start the firms that became Finland's new technology scene. The giant fell. The seeds it scattered grew into something else. So what can we actually learn from the rise and fall of Nokia? Not that its leaders were idiots. They were some of the most admired managers in the world, right up until the moment they weren't. The deeper lesson is colder than that. Being the biggest is not the same as being safe. Nokia was not beaten at the thing it was best at, building phones. It was beaten by a shift in the very ground beneath the industry, the move from selling a device to running a platform, and it simply could not turn fast enough to follow. The rules of the game changed, and being the best player of the old game counted for almost nothing. And there is a quieter lesson tucked inside this one, about the danger of betting a whole country, or a whole life, on one single winner that looks unbeatable. Because the phones really were indestructible. It was everything around them that turned out to be fragile.